The story of Noah's flood is a shared narrative in Abrahamic religions, recounting how the prophet Noah was chosen by God to warn his people against corruption and idolatry. After preaching for about 1,000 years and with only a few converts, God instructed him to build an ark in preparation for a devastating flood as punishment to non-believers. Noah and his companions built an ark, gathered his followers and pairs of all animal species, and boarded the ark, survived the flood, and subsequently began a new life on an earth, cleansed of disbelievers. Here, the scale of the flood is a key point of interpretation. The Bible explicitly describes a global flood, whereas the Quran's language only implies it. Early interpretations of the Quranic account also suggested global flood, likely influenced by biblical narratives. However, in light of modern scientific and historical understanding, many contemporary Muslim scholars have shifted towards interpreting it as a massive but localized flood. We will analyze both scenarios. First, if the flood was a global event. Second, if the flood was a local event, impacting the area near present-day eastern Turkey, Armenia, and northwestern Iran, the old ancient Mesopotamian region, around the 4th and 3rd millennium BCE. Starting off with the first theory that if the flood was global. A literal global flood interpretation opens a flood of scientific and logical questions, which are the subject of lengthy debates. We will not delve into all the details here, but will instead summarize the key challenges before moving to localized flood theory. 1. Insufficient water. The total volume of water on Earth, in oceans, ice caps, and the atmosphere, has been relatively constant throughout Earth history. We can be certain that it is the same for at least last 7,000 plus years. The total quantity of water required to submerge whole Earth will be about 2.5 times than what we have or ever had, making a global flood hydrologically impossible. 2. The Ark's impossibility. The logistical requirements for Noah's Ark are unrealistic, to say the least. From building with limited resources to housing, feeding, and providing fresh water for all terrestrial animal species, along with their specific dietary and environmental needs, would require a vessel of impossible size and complexity. 3. Ecological collapse. A weeks-long flood would destroy all terrestrial plant life, leaving herbivores without a food source after the waters receded. Furthermore, the planet would be left a barren, muddy wasteland, unable to support the rapid re-establishment of complex ecosystems necessary for survival. 4. Predator-prey dynamics. The idea of carnivores coexisting peacefully with potential prey in a confined space for a prolonged period defies natural behavior. 5. Global shipbuilding evidence. And established shipbuilding cultures along with active fleet existed concurrently around the world, from Egypt and the Indus Valley to China and the Americas, providing easy survival opportunities to disbelievers. Plus, a global flood would have had to eradicate all these independent civilizations, for which there is no historical or archaeological evidence. 6. Disproportionate punishment. The population disobeying Noah was estimated to be only a tiny fraction of total humanity on Earth, less than 5%. Punishing all global populations, including innocent children, infants, and animals from distant continents, for the sins of one region is difficult to reconcile with divine justice and mercy. 7. The problem of suffering. Death by drowning or prolonged starvation is an intensely torturous end. Inflicting this on innocent beings like children and animals is challenging to reconcile with the nature of a loving deity. 8. The theological argument that God foreknew children's future disobedience contradicts the core principle of free will and earthly test. 9. This story seems to have striking resemblance to the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Babylonian story written about 500 years before Prophet Moses. We are stopping at a round-off number 10. Accounts of great floods from that period also appear in other civilizations, such as those in China and India, possibly as a result of melting ice after the last ice age. Each culture offers its own interpretation, though in the case of China, flood narratives were generally not associated with religious themes. Now moving on to the second scenario of localized flooding. With local floods, some of the above issues still apply, plus following are additional points. 1. If the flood was only a localized done, then why build a ship in years? Why not just migrate to safer grounds with followers and animals? 2. If it was local flood, then there is no reason to take pairs of all animals, as animals from surrounding would continue the species. 3. If it was a local flood, then water would have receded or accumulated in smaller areas just like any other flood, especially considering high altitude of the region, and would not be a catastrophic event as mentioned in holy text. 4. According to the Quran, all of humanity after the flood were descendants of the ark's survivors, verse 37 to 76 and 77, or verse 17:3, which contradict the local flood theory, as majority of the humans, in fact more than 96% of humans, were not affected by the local flood. 5. Local flood did not prove any divine miracle. These floods happen too often. 6. With localized flood, there are always survivors, especially in the hilly region, so the purpose of drowning all disbelievers could not be accomplished. 7. If all this was due to God intervention and happened as a miracle, then why not just have a miracle of populating all animals back? 8. Although not stated explicitly, the Quran implies that all animals, including birds, were taken aboard Noah's Ark. The Arabic phrase used is min kullin zawjayn ithnayn, of every kind, 2 pairs. If the flood had been local, birds could have simply flown to safety. 9. Cultural and civilizational continuity around Mesopotamia contradicts a large-scale flood narrative. And stopping at 10, God seems to have only one solution for his problems with disbelievers: kill them. But killing is normally through earthly physical events and always very dramatic, plus punishments which are general in approach.